back, and I am recording. It looks like my feed dropped while I was recording the lecture, and that is such a pain in the ass. You have no idea. But because I got like 20 more slides in before I noticed that it dropped. I don't know whether it's my I'm pointing at my counter that I'm going to have to look down at every once in a while. I'm not sure that it's my internet that does that. I use OBS software to record these. So now one lecture will be two, but I'm sorry. In the meantime, I know that while we were talking, this thing happened. The Fed is going to keep interest rates at zero through 2022. He sees the gross domestic product bouncing to 5% next year. I'm sorry to use this word, but that's fucking delusional. It's not going to happen. But anyway, anybody with a brain knows that. I don't know why that is a political statement. Anyhow, the Dow is down 144. It briefly rallied while I was talking before, and now it's down again. I would like to have seen him talk live. He's not a dumb guy. He's just, again, you have these conflicts of interest when well-meaning, smart people get the levers of power. Remember that Powell was appointed by the president, and so he works at the behest of the president, at behest of the political establishment. So you get what you understand what goes on there. The idea that the Federal Reserve is independent is an absurdity. So anyhow, but let's get back to price ceilings and how they cause inefficiency. I think when I stopped, when it dropped, I was talking about black markets, and the most famous black market, of course, is in either drugs and we'll talk a little bit more about that, or alcohol, during Prohibition. But anyway, ceilings cause these predictable side effects, and it's pretty easy to see. So how do you measure low quality? This is what occurs if you ever get a chance to go to New York City, you'll see the effects of this, because if you take the train through the Bronx or through the blighted areas of New York, you think, what happened here? Why did this occur? What's wrong with these greedy landlords? And it's not greed, it's government that screwed this up. What happens is when you set the price too low, the demand is up here, but supply falls off because a lot of suppliers fall out of the marketplace. They don't want to supply it at that number. So what do they end up doing? They end up not maintaining. They have to make a profit somehow, so they don't maintain their buildings. And then you have the added stupidity. And if you want to read about this, I'm making sure my counter's working now. I'm all freaked out. If you want to really see what happens, Google Aspen-Pitkin County Housing Authority. What they do is they create what's called affordable housing up in Aspen-Pitkin County, mainly Aspen. Well, they've been around since the 70s, and they've been failing since the 70s. So what I did here was I clicked on my news. I put APCHA in the news. I've done this in every class, and you can just go back years. You can go back years and see just what's been going on in a housing authority, a government entity that's been trying to tackle this problem, and they can't do it. They keep getting more and more money and more bureaucracy, and they fail, and they fail miserably. Um, what occurs is, and what we know as economists is, especially free market economists, not Keynesians, we we see that they look at a situation like this and they go, you know what, if we just tweak it a little bit and we get the right committee together, we'll have a better outcome. And that committee never occurs. They can't, because they can't do this. They can't set price and quantity correctly. They always fail. And it's the same thing with the Federal Reserve. They will always fail at getting the market right. That's the beauty of the pricing mechanism. And that's why when you set the price of money, it's the main price of everything. And then you end up having winners and losers. In the case of setting interest rates at zero, the winners are borrowers, the losers are savers. If you want to save money, you lose. That's not right. So anyway, here's the winners and losers from rent control. Producers lose. Some lucky renters gain. Some unlucky but willing renters don't get a place at all. That's what happens. You end up with a shortage. And that plays out in New York and San Francisco. It's very easy to see. They're very tight markets. And Aspen is fantastic. It's just, you couldn't get a better example of a market gone astray. What happens is, and the other part of this that I want to discuss when I talk about the Aspen situation is zoning de facto, which means in fact does the same thing. It creates this shortage. So when you have 2-acre zoning, or if you're a millionaire or a billionaire and you want to, it's always grounded in this idea of, oh, we want to keep the quality of the town. Well, what does that mean? It sounds effing racist to me. But nevertheless, we can only have 2-acre zoning, and you can only build so high. And this goes back to my discussion of property rights in the previous stack. Um, if I wanted to solve the problem in Aspen with housing, there's plenty of places where you could build, and you could build some really pretty apartments, and they would be environmentally friendly and all the other BS. And not that that's BS, don't get me wrong. It's nice to build nice apartments, and you could house all those people that are going up and down Highway 82 could be housed in Meralt, or they could be housed at Cozy Point, or they could be housed where there's a giant parking lot for all the intercept lot for RAFTA. RAFTA, by the way, I pay taxes on my property taxes to fund a bus system that brings people from Rifle to hotels up in Aspen. That I don't want to pay for that. That's bullshit. I don't want to do that. If you have an Aspen, if you have a hotel up in Aspen, or you want a domestic worker from Rifle, you should house them and or drive them up there every day. I don't want to provide a bus system. That's not my interest. I don't give a damn about Aspen. I live in Glenwood Springs. So the idea that and P.S. if you're an environmentalist, you're burning fuel going up and down 82, all because the zoning in Aspen is creating a price ceiling on it's causing this effect of rent control. It's causing a housing shortage. So there's no affordable housing up in what we quote unquote affordable housing, whatever the hell that is. That's subjective. So, but it's causing that up there. You want to take care of 82, and you want to take care of RAFTA and all that. That's all you got to do. And the restrictive regulations and the restrictive zoning up in Aspen, and you will have people, entrepreneurs, come in there and they'll start building again, and they'll do it right. So producers lose, right? There's people that want to build that housing. You get inefficient allocation to customers. They distort signals, right? Prices are signals that help the goods get allocated to the highest valued uses. That's what they do. The problem with price controls of any kind, they cause widespread and persistent shortages in a place like the USSR. Um, Consumers who value the good most won't necessarily get it. The USSR was a it's the same thing as going on in Venezuela. We're about to see that. 2 hours to get a loaf of bread every day. What is your time worth? These are, unless you read, you don't understand. When you flippantly say, "Oh, Bernie Sanders," who, by the way, went on his honeymoon to Moscow during the height of the Cold War. He's a communist through and through. Make no mistake. Uh, to not see this, to not see the simplicity of this, to me, is absurd. And you can call it democratic socialism or whatever the hell you want. Put your modifier on it. It's the same thing. It doesn't work. Price controls that create shortages lead to bribery and wasteful lines. So what you had in the Soviet Union was you had more class injustices. It was more hierarchical because of all the bribery and everything else. Anybody who's from there could tell you the same story. Shortages, not all buyers be able to purchase the good. And this goes for any socialist country. Normally, buyers would compete with each other by offering a higher price. If the price is not allowed to rise, buyers have to compete in other ways. So you rent somebody an apartment, at that price, at the $800 price, and then you say, well, if you need a key for the mailbox, that's going to be $1,000 a month. Or some other way around this. The parking space in the garage downstairs is going to be $1,000 a month. There's always a workaround. There's always a bag. It was always said in New York, you need a bag of money to go get an apartment. It's like, it's just you pay off the right real estate agent and all this. So there's all kinds of kickback schemes because and you create lawbreakers. And those of you who are psych majors, you know this. Once you break one law, you'll break another law. It's sort of you make a nation of lawbreakers. The mercantilistic period in Great Britain was a huge example of this. They wanted to get as close to autarky as they could. They wanted to make all the goods and services that they needed in their country. They didn't want to import anything, so they created this grandiose tariff system, and everybody was. There was a huge black market. The rum runners and everything else. What do we call that? When you import things, smugglers. Everybody was a smuggler. So everybody's a lawbreaker. When you make too many laws, you end up with a nation full of lawbreakers. So control price. Sellers have more customers, right? They have more customers than goods. In a free market, this is an opportunity to profit by raising prices, but you can't raise your price. So when prices are controlled, sellers can't. So if you were in the real estate business, let's say you were a landlord, if you're making a profit, say 10%, maybe you only need 5% to live on, and the other 5% you're putting into savings. And then with that savings, you're going to build another building because you're good at it, right? Because you're a good landlord. So what do you end up with? You end up with the crappiest landlords. Sellers respond to this problem in two ways. This landlords reduce qualities. They don't take care of their buildings, and they reduce service. This occurred, if if you remember, but you probably don't. Richard Nixon in the 1970s. We had this crazy time. I can remember my dad. They were selling gas every other day. We had an argument overseas and an oil embargo by the Saudis and other Arab nations, OPEC, the oil producing um, nations overseas, and they had an embargo on us. And what happened was gasoline spiked. So what they did was they put price ceilings on it. And what happened? Full service gas stations went away. It used to be when I used to go to the gas station with my dad, somebody came out and they pumped the gas, and they washed your windshield and they checked your oil and all these things. So not only did the price ceiling do away with that, they did away with jobs. People. That's how a lot of young people like my age, you worked for. I can remember it was Frank's Mobile. It was a mobile oil service station that Dad dealt with, and he always had a kid there that pumped the gas. Kid meaning like 14, and that kid would learn how to change tires, and then he'd learn how to change oil, and maybe he'd go on to be a mechanic. So because you eliminated through a price ceiling those full service gas station jobs, maybe you screwed some young person out of a career. I mean, these decisions have real life kind of consequences. And we're going to get into minimum wage, of course, which is our discussion, doing the same thing. When you have a minimum wage, the people that you eliminate from the workforce are the young people. And it turns out, of course, it's not only young people, but young minority people in the inner city. So why are they on the street corner selling drugs? Why? Well, turns out because you set the minimum wage too high. So what happens is, instead of me hiring somebody, say, in the kitchen, like I work in a kitchen on campus as an accountant, but we hire a dishwasher. Well, who are we hiring? We're hiring because we have to pay $12 and $13 an hour. We hire people who are older, you know. And it used to be that you would hire somebody for $6 an hour. And it was their first job. So you know what happened to them? They learned how to put on a uniform, wear a hat, punch in, get along with the Mexican ladies because they're in charge, and learn some goddamn Spanish because they're in charge, and they're going to teach you how to do stuff like cut a piece of fruit, and they're going to teach you how to make chili or meat or whatever it is that they're doing. They're going to share their knowledge with you because they're great women. And they taught me enough, for God's sake. They taught me Spanish, and that. So because a young person gets that first job for shit money, then they get their second job. Then they get their third job. You get it? You when you cut them out of that marketplace, they're marginally unemployed. On the margin, young people and minorities are unemployed. It's the minimum wage law, besides being a price floor, is also what I consider the most racist of all laws. So it's sort of a return to Jim Crow, and people don't realize that. But it's in how it, not in its intention, in its effect, And we don't do things by intention. We do things by how they actually work. So black market is a market which goods or services are bought and sold illegally. Once again, back to our discussion of policing, this cottage industry of the drug war has got to end. It is absurd. People are dying needlessly in Mexico. They're dying needlessly on this side of the border, and all of those. You're making a young person in an inner city choose between a minimum wage job or working under the table somewhere with peddling drugs, and they're going to choose peddling drugs. And maybe they're going to get introduced to drugs, and then. These are all individual decisions, But the incentives created by a black market in something like cocaine or pot or whatever, we've come a little ways here in in our country or in our state with legalizing marijuana, but it's so overregulated. It's barely a free market, and not even a free market. It's so overregulated. It's barely not a black market, and people still selling the stuff all over the place. I mean, these are my people, so I know. And listen, the other thing you have to get out of the way about the drug thing is people like me are 1 in 10 about. That seems like the number that sticks. If you look around your group of friends or whatever, about 1 out of every 10 of your friends is an alcoholic or an addict, and it's I think it's genetic, but that's just my opinion. Um, God, God knows you can look around the Cleaver family, and it seems like it's genetic, but nonetheless, you're not going to fix that by making drugs illegal. You're not going to fix me. I drink no matter what. I use drugs no matter what. Doesn't matter. So you're better off dealing with addiction as a separate health problem and not a criminal problem, and eliminate this black market. Because most people, you'll have a spike in cocaine use or whatever, and then it'll level off because most people got a brain in their head and they go, you know what, when I do a lot of blow, it's really bad for me. And, or dropping acid and going to work is going to get me fired or whatever the hell everybody thinks, oh my God, it'll be Armageddon. That's a crock of shit. People don't show up at work drunk every day. Normal people. Now me, it's another story. Uh, sober today. Um, so why are there price ceilings? They benefit people. Duh. Um, you know, these are people who are special interest groups. They're more vocal than those who are harmed by them. So you want to get rid of those groups. Term limitations would be a great way to start. Getting rid of career politicians would be a great way to stop. These special pleadings of the steel industry or this or that. If a price ceiling is long-standing, buyers may not have a realistic idea of what would happen without it. This is so true. And this is never more apparent than when I teach. Is when you say something like um, policing is way overpriced. Everybody goes, how could that be? And I said, well, it's the price for policing is set by the government. It's a pricing scheme. I think cops are underpaid, but that's just my opinion. But some of the idea is, well, nobody knows what it was like without policing. And then you say, well, what was it like? Well, it was the Wild West. So what are we going to do about it? Well, maybe if we hire a sheriff that's from our community, we won't have some of the bad incentives that go along with outside police or however that is. And I don't have all the answers there, but if a price ceiling, what shocks me is, my point is, when I start to teach and I start to teach some of my ideas, my libertarian ideas, they're rooted in a knowledge of history. The roads weren't always government roads. I know that sounds freaky, but they were private. Okay. Schools were not government schools. They were private. Okay. In this country, you name it. And it used to be taken care of by the free market. But what happens is students don't remember this because they don't have any experience with it. So they think that everything is all these things that are done by the government have been done by the government forever. They haven't been. It's not true. So history is important. Good history taught correctly, which is not what's going on in K through 12. I think the miseducation of people is just astonishing to me. You have to unlearn a bunch of shit to begin to understand how the world works. Government officials do not understand supply and demand. Well, Uh, again, going back to the government schools, this may come as a shock to you. I mean, I'm a lover of mathematics, but maybe we should teach one less year of mathematics so that students could get a semester of statistics, um, so they wouldn't be duped by bad statistics like the ones that are being thrown around by Black Lives Matter, and also a semester of this course. Let's go, just basic economics taught in a heterodox fashion, uh, the way I'm trying to teach it. Where you get both sides of free markets and Keynesian ideas, socialism and capitalism, and you can get an idea of what's going on in the world. I think that would be a great thing to have for students. So Venezuela's food shortages, price controls disproportionately hurt the people they were designed to benefit. No question, every time. And this is what happens right here. And if you think that's one of the tragedies of COVID, is that as this human rights tragedy unfolds in Venezuela due to socialism, we're too focused and occupied with our own problems to realize that people are dying over here. Our sense of proportion in this country is even my own, and I'm no different. I forget to be grateful, and I think that there's a lot of people that are forgetting to be grateful right now because we got a great thing going here. And I don't care if you're black or you're Mexican or you're a woman or what the hell's going on, you got it better than this. And I say that, I don't give a shit if you think I'm a racist, I'm not. That's the truth of the matter. We have a great thing going here. So we should be thinking of Venezuela in our prayers, in my opinion, because people are really, really dying there. Dying from government and dying from starvation. Do you know it's now illegal to write on a death certificate in Venezuela starvation? In other words, if your child dies in the hospital, they won't put that on the birth certificate or on the death certificate because it's against the law. That's how they got rid of starvation there. They just made an edict by law that you couldn't do that anymore. That is death by government. So governments intervene to push market prices up instead of down. Oh gosh, here we're going to get into agriculture and minimum wage. The generous minimum wage. Oops, I'm going to move that. Generous minimum wage in many European countries has contributed to a high rate of unemployment and the flourishing of an illegal labor market. People work under the table. Where's that rate of unemployment the highest? I just went over it in young people and minorities and women. So there you go. Modeling price floor of the market after the price control. This is my favorite because I was a dairy farmer. And it's really close to home because I saw the effects firsthand. And if you listen to my first lecture and listen to me go through my life, in a lot of ways, this blew me away. I was like, what? I started farming and I realized I had no control over the price I was getting for the product I was producing. And this may sound silly to you, but I couldn't negotiate. So the only thing I could do was cut cost. So, farming, any kind of farming becomes this game of cutting cost and lobbying for higher prices. So there's no greater welfare in the country than the farm bill. It's corporate welfare. It's whatever you want to call it, but it's a whole bunch of farmers lobbying to get theirs, and it's absurd. There's this idea, and Murray Rothbard goes over it pretty good, that farmers are somehow the men of the soil, and we're somehow better than you are, or some bullshit like that. I can tell you that nothing could be further from the truth. Uh, Working on a farm is no different from working anywhere else, except you work more if you're a dairy farmer. But it's not hard, and I wasn't morally better than anyone else because I was making food. Um, on the contrary. So price floors have these predictable side effects, right? You saw it here. Here's the surplus, right? Instead of $1, it's at $1.20. What do you do with the butter? What do? You have a persistent surplus of 3 million pounds of butter. There's caves in this country filled with butter. That is so crazy. One of the greatest scams in the world is to start a facility that stores agricultural commodities and get a contract from the government. It's like, you know, getting a license from the king, which is mercantilism. So it's not. So if you say to me, we have our country is based on capitalism, I'll say, well, not agriculture. Agriculture is almost completely socialized. Almost every commodity has some kind of quota or price floor involved, or tariffs on outside. I read a book about King Sugar in Florida and how they drained the drained the swamp to allow sugar growers to grow more cane sugar and keep the price up, artificially support the price of sugar, to the great detriment of people's health. So that's a, if you want to, if we were writing papers this semester, it's sugar is a really interesting price control scam, political scam that they perpetrated in Florida and other places. The price for sugar should be half what it is in this country, but through a series of price supports and quotas, we pay more for sugar, and it's in everything. So there's a really high supply of it. So price floors cause inefficient allocation of sales, wasted resources, inefficiently high quality, right? You don't need the quality. Temptation to break the law by selling below the legal price. There's your black market, uh, you know, and that's the truth. So why the price floor causes an inefficiently low quantity, um, reduces the quantity demanded below the market equilibrium quantity and leads to a dead weight loss, right? You have all this supply, but the demand goes down. Um, that leads to this dead weight loss. More people would drink milk if it was cheaper or use butter. Um, Price floors misallocate sales by allowing high cost firms to operate. I can't tell you how many times I thought, why the hell do I have to compete with that shitty farmer down the street? I'm doing a much better job, but I have no way to compete with them because they're getting the same price I am. You see, so prices signal. They reduce these high cost firms. They get rid of them, and that's natural. So you have all these farmers out there who are half-assed and they're no good at what they do. And then you go, oh, why do we have this problem? Well, you set prices too high with a price floor, um, and you also keep people out, right? TV licenses keep people out. Licenses have this effect as well. Um, Price floors and regulation prevented Southwest Airlines in '79 from entering the national market. It's really hard to get into a very regulated market. Why are there only, 6 car makers? There used to be 100 car makers when we first started making automobiles. They got regulated out of existence. This is a de facto price floor. They encourage waste, right? You start, burning crops and throwing things away and killing pigs and doing all kinds of crazy shit. The history of the New Deal and Roosevelt. This is where all this came from, by the way. Roosevelt was not a good president. He was a terrible president. It was the worst thing that ever happened to this country. And if anybody says, "Oh, you're an idiot," I'm like, "Oh, that's fine," but I can show you. And if you want to read about it, uh, the best book, bar none, on the real history of uh, the